Sometime in the late 1970s, a young man was sent to stay at our local hotel. He was supposed to get a job and gather information on the McLeans. His entry was to be through the Georgina Duplicate Bridge Club, as I was on the executive and would naturally be present every Tuesday evening. This man appeared several weeks in a row claiming he knew how to play bridge and he was interested. One evening, we were one person short and I asked him to play. It turns out he didn't even know how to sort his cards. Oh dear. And he knew nothing about how to play bridge. Now I knew for sure that he was a spy. However, what I didn't know was that he was sent here to cause me to have a fatal accident. In other words, to kill me. In an interesting twist of fate, he came over to my house one Saturday morning and I started talking about Scientology. His face got redder and redder until he finally admitted that he was a Scientologist. I then went to work showing him what Scientology was really all about. This, of course, wasn't difficult because he himself was here on a geo mission to kill me. It's not really funny, I know, but that's the truth. Apparently, I was successful, as he left Sutton and went directly to the police force in Toronto and told them about his mission. However, and further to that, it is my understanding that written proof ordering the fatal accident against me was found in the Toronto raid documents, and I couldn't have them. But I knew they existed, and that's good. Fortunately for me, this B-1 action to kill me was aborted. The next item I'd like to present to you is very close to my heart, and one that saddens me greatly, even today. On January the 18th, 1974, Walt Curry arrived unannounced, and of course, we were highly suspicious of his motives. However, we made him welcome, and between Eric, John, and I, and Eric's homemade wine, we managed to have a nice evening. Walt getting more and more loose and friendly. We finally got around to talking about all the difficulties we were having with the org. Walt volunteered that the GEO was totally responsible for everything to date. The phone calls to the neighbors, the criminal charges, the spy activity, etc., etc. I asked him if he would write an affidavit for me to that effect, and he said yes. I asked him if he would testify in court for me, and he said yes. Walt then told us an incredible story about his experience while in LA, which he said was the reason he left Scientology. During his growing up years, Walt's father was, I believe, a Canadian ambassador serving in several countries. During his mid-teens, they were in Korea, and naturally he made friends with the local boys. Walt told us that while he was on course studying in LA, he was called from study by the senior guardian's office staff members and ordered to go on a GEO mission to Korea and spy for Scientology. Somehow the GEO had gathered enough information to know that Walt had been a friend to some of the boys who were now in power in Korea. He refused. He immediately returned to Toronto and blew Scientology. I again asked if he would file an affidavit for us, and he said yes. I again asked if he would testify in court for us, and again he said yes. Sometime in August 1975, during my doubt period about Emile Gilbert, I decided to test him by telling him what Walt Curry was preparing to do for us. Emile's immediate response to each of the points was shock and a quick, "Has he filed the affidavit yet?" I replied that he had not. Please remember that the more sensitive and critical the information you have, the greater the threat you are to Scientology. I had no idea this was a great threat to Scientology, or I never would have done it. Two days later, Emile phoned me and told me Walt Curry was dead. 2 days! I was horrified. I almost blurted out the question, who killed him? Instead, I asked him how he died and was told it was a tent fire, along with one other person, and that there was one survivor. Very little was said after that, and we hung up. My next move was to go immediately to the police station, where I requested a private interview room. I made them take my report, adding one more thing, that I believe Walt Curry was murdered by Scientology, and that I was responsible for it. I heard from an official in Toronto who tried to have me withdraw my whole report. I refused. And on September the 25th, 1975, I received a letter from Provincial Constable L.E. Carter informing me that there was to be an inquest on October the 24th, 1975, and that I was welcome to attend. On September the 30th, 1975, I received a summons to appear at the inquest. My husband Eric went with me, and when we arrived, I was told that my testimony would not be necessary. That was not acceptable to me. I demanded that I be heard and was granted that right, but only after the inquest concluded, which meant that the jurors had heard the information presented from the perspective of making safety recommendations to the manufacturers of camping gear. By the time I was allowed to testify, I couldn't make them listen. The jurors, that is. I couldn't make them understand the discrepancies that had been presented in the testimony all through the inquest. I was very disturbed, as they appeared to have been given a direction to follow which did not address the issue of possible murder, which is why the inquest was being called in the first place. This is very painful to me, as I feel responsible for Walt Curry's death. And the death of an innocent man. And I believe that the survivor had been paid off to give false testimony. On April 18, 1974, the injunction which would have denied me the right to speak about Scientology on radio and television in the breach of contract suit was heard and denied. On April the 29th, see how quickly they went to court, because they lost the first one on the 18th, and on the 29th, that's 11 days later, they were back in court getting a decision on an appeal by the Church of Scientology, and said injunction was granted this time until the breach of contract was tried in court. Said case was never heard, and the injunction remained in place until all lawsuits were dispersed in 1987. That's 13 years. Mind you, I didn't shut up. In Dissemination of Material, L. Ron Hubbard wrote, quote, "The purpose of the suit is to harass and discourage rather than to win. The law can be used very easily to harass, and enough harassment on somebody who is simply on the thin edge anyway, well knowing that he is not authorized, will generally be sufficient to cause his professional decease. If possible, of course, ruin him utterly." That's L. Ron Hubbard quote, gentlemen. The law was used to harass me and silence me, as the Church of Scientology always had some excuse for not proceeding with the lawsuit. This constituted yet another B1 action. See magazine articles on Level Zero. Sometime in the mid-1980s, John and I had to go to Tampa on a summary jury trial. After takeoff, and while still climbing, the plane suddenly turned around, and the captain announced that we were returning to Toronto on a technicality. We spoke with the head steward, asking whether the captain had received a bomb threat. We further indicated that we believed we knew why, as we were on our way to a Scientology trial in Tampa, Florida, and if we didn't arrive, there would be no trial. As soon as we landed, away from all buildings, buses arrived to pick up the passengers to deliver them back to the terminal. We were escorted directly to the intelligence room and questioned. I asked to be able to phone Detective Al Ciampini, and when I finally reached him, I told him what was happening to us and asked for his assistance as we were being interrogated rather heavily. It was rather frightening for the passengers and a very costly procedure for the airline. When we finally did arrive in Tampa, very late that afternoon, the Scientologists were there taking our pictures as we deplaned. Later on, after returning home, Al told me that the call was made from the public phone booth right beside the Church of Scientology. As there was no direct evidence, no charges could be laid. Coincidence? I don't think so. B1 action, yes. On January the 15th, 1986, a Sears employee phoned me to tell me that the parcel I had ordered had arrived. I asked what was in it and was told there were 5 knives. As I had not placed the order, and it was charged to my Sears account, I contacted Inspector Coslin of 39 Division, which is my local division, by the way, who checked into the matter, indicating that the order couldn't be traced. Then, on June 3rd, 1986, PC D. Hunt attended my home and took a statement in regards to the knives from Sears and the fraudulent use of my account. We then went to the Sears store in Sutton, where PC Hunt noted the parcel labels and witnessed me opening all 5 boxes, each with a knife in it. Still another B1 action, this time in the form of a symbolic death threat. A number of defamatory, untrue documents originating from the Church of Scientology sources about the McLeans had been circulated, as well as dead agenting materials, a process of telling stories to negate information. The McLean family, variously and individually, had been sued 17 times by the Church of Scientology, which has the reputation of being one of the most litigious organizations in the world. In Tampa, in 1987, the Church of Scientology induced all its critics who had Florida-based lawsuits and their solicitors to come to Tampa for settlement talks. This meant a horrendous day in court. Each of the parties and their lawyers were in a totally protected separate part of the courtroom. The judge was at her station, available to the lawyers for clarification and any necessary rulings. Finally, everyone had reached their acceptance except me. Even my son John was ready to settle. I wanted our day in court, with all records available to the public. The requirement for this settlement was that all plaintiffs had to settle right now, this very day, or there was no settlement. The judge, realizing that I was the only holdout, indicated that she wanted to see the McLeans in her chambers, together with Mr. Logan. No sooner were we walking into the room than she started in on me. Her demeanor was harsh, unfriendly, forceful, and intimidating. She demanded to know why I wouldn't settle. I explained that I wanted justice to prevail and the public at large to have a reference point to work from. I felt our case needed to be heard in court. The judge was exasperated with me and my holdback. She wanted this settlement, and she didn't care about what I wanted. This was a huge win for her. Finally, she forcefully stated that I'd better settle right now or else. I can't guarantee a court date this year. I can't guarantee a court date next year. And I can't guarantee a court date the following year or the year after that. So you'd better settle right now. I was in tears by this time. Mr. Logan tried to console me by saying, "They haven't taken your right to counsel away, and you can reconstruct your document collection, especially the FBI documents I had worked so hard and so long to collect at my own personal expense, and with the help of friends in Washington, D.C., who provided a home for me. They are so special to me." Throughout the years, I have been contacted by a steady stream of operatives whose intention was to gather information and steal documents. The following people had varying degrees of success at their endeavors. Gary McKeag of Ottawa. Gary has used references of alleged collaboration with Eric McLean to author a book in order to obtain information from government offices, most specifically mental health organizations and Mr. George Rohn. Jonathan James, which is an alias for Chris Palmer, who was sent to gather upper-level material. Vera Slavin tried to gain admittance as an old friend for the purpose of coming to my home and on the pretext that she wanted to interview me for the book she was writing and for the purpose of getting upper-level materials. Bill Hess, who is also known as Mike Shannon, from Portland, also wanted upper-level materials. Dick Bast, a private investigator hired by the Church of Scientology to gather information from Paulette Cooper and Judge Ritchie. However, since I was there at the time, Bast and I were thrown together, and he taped me unbeknownst to me. Fred Kane, who was an employee of Dick Bast, was hired to get information for the Church of Scientology. Merle Vanier is a lawyer and a GO operative. he stole all my defense documents from my former lawyer's office, having gained admittance through false pretenses. This is the end of part 2. Part 3. What can we do about it? The biggest hurdle we have to jump, in my humble opinion, is Scientology as a religion. Scientology hides behind this cloak, and legislators, judges, and jurors, police persons, and governmental officials are all afraid to take action against a so-called religion. If a religion has a hidden arm that is guilty of crimes and hurts decent law-abiding citizens, shouldn't it be charged and punished regardless of its religious status? If a religion has a hidden arm which is guilty of committing crimes, should it have religious status? The government of Australia should ban the illegal and unethical practices of the Church of Scientology. The former Anderson inquiry took it a step further and actually banned the Church of Scientology. But, unfortunately, it forgot to close the back door, which Scientology is famous for using. Any legislation designed to limit the organization from functioning within the country must include, or by any other name, government officials must take more responsibility for giving endorsements to any product, thought, or idea. The example is a news article which I have included regarding a mayor of a small town giving an endorsement for a Scientology pamphlet which he knew nothing about. Governments must label Scientology as a fraudulent organization, as in truth, it cannot deliver God powers to an OT8 per the 1970 Gray Chart. Since the critics have exposed this part of the fraud, Hubbard removed the complete description from the chart, leaving simply the abilities for the level as the actual end product. Scientology also promises to raise an individual's IQ, and all auditing is really fraudulent. Scientology fraudulently professes to be a church. In a breach of contract suit brought against me, the Church of Scientology claimed damages for loss of business. While it was also claiming to be a religion, it was still at the same time claiming to be suffering loss of business. It doesn't work that way. Scientology's method of controlling the ruling body is an even bigger biggie. One of Hubbard's policies is called the Department of Government Affairs, which states in part, quote, always find or manufacture enough threat against them to cause them to sue for peace, unquote. See that document. Example of what that document means. While in Calgary visiting friends who had just left Scientology, I went together with Mr. John Hooker to Edmonton to speak with the Minister of Consumer Affairs for the province of Alberta. The purpose of our visit was to present information to the ministry and to see if we could label Scientology as a fraudulent organization. We talked for a while, and the minister turned to me and asked me whether I knew anyone who didn't have something to hide. I was stunned for a moment, as I wasn't expecting such a question from the Minister of Consumer Affairs. I demurely replied, I haven't. And the minister, rising up, with his hands on his massive mahogany desk, in a forceful, angry tone, responded, "Well, I have!" In the name of justice, some officials might need to recuse themselves. Either we have the strength to go beyond our own personal fears, or we haven't. And if we haven't, we must have the strength to recuse ourselves. It is my hope that the information I have presented for you, Senators, will be of assistance to you in deciding whether you should in fact hold an inquiry into the Church of Scientology. I thank you for watching my video, and I am available for consultation at any time, and I am available to make the trip to Australia should you wish me to. Thank you.